The Matrix Reloaded again has been released on HBO Max to mixed reviews from audience members and critics. In fact, it has been a long time in the history of the internet.com since we've seen something on Rotten Tomatoes that essentially has parity between the audience score and between the critic score on their website. So it is this great uniting moment on the internet where people have gotten on board with kind of feeling very meh about a movie. And for those of you who are unaware about my opinion on the whole Matrix franchise, obviously you didn't watch my other video where I talked about Sex and the City and how I don't think this obsession with nostalgia is very healthy for people, but it may surprise you, it may shock and stun you to realize that I actually didn't particularly hate this movie. Now, to be clear, this movie's not good. This movie is not something that forwards the Matrix storyline in the way that some people, for some ungodly reason out there, would want it to do so. However, it's not really designed to do that, and it's the fact that this movie was clearly made by somebody who did not want to make Matrix 4 that made me enjoy those aspects of the movie. A newly discovered security flaw seems to be one of the worst ones in the last decade. This security flaw will allow hackers, spies, criminals access to your private personal data as long as you have an internet connected device. But luckily for you, your privacy is and always has been in your own hands, and that's why I recommend Virtual Shield, because Virtual Shield is a no-log VPN, meaning they never store your search history, which for a lot of you, trust me, we never want to see your search history. Now, this month, I partnered with the creators of Virtual Shield to give you guys a 50% off discount for your lifetime subscription if you just go to virtualshield.com/justice. Again, 50% off, no log VPN. It's also got that bunch of features, like if you want to do that out of country streaming, whatever, just go to virtualshield.com/justice. But before you guys can understand my opinions on Matrix Reloaded again another time, or Matrix Rebooted, or is it called Matrix Resurrections? I think it's actually called Matrix Resurrections. You need to understand my opinion of the Matrix sequels that preceded this and the original Matrix. Now, obviously, the original Matrix, fantastic movie. It works really well as a one-off story. One of the reasons why my light in the background is green is because narratively, every time they're in the Matrix, there's like a green hue about the footage to let you out there in the audience know that they're actually in the Matrix. Now, with that being said, I like visual storytelling, so I appreciated that. The sequels are not things that really appeal to me ever, and I understand that Matrix Reloaded, I think, had the biggest box office draw of all these movies. It also has that very fantastic highway scene where they actually build out a huge portion of a highway just to shoot that scene, which is really awesome. And the Matrix movies overall have been really good with displaying action for the audience, even if the second and third Matrix, in my opinion, are totally unnecessary and nonsensical. However, this new movie is essentially making fun of people who want another addition to the old trilogy, because obviously the Wachowskis, and Lana Wachowski is the only one who came back to helm this film, are done with the Matrix franchise. It's basically a mockery of the premise of soft reboots, which again is just retelling the same story from the first one, because from a studio perspective, they want to bring back the old characters to bring in the old fans, but they don't want to have people feel like they have to go back and watch the original movies in order to get into the story, which is why they essentially retell the same story. This is what Force Awakens did. This is what Jurassic World did. This is what so many of these movies that fall into the soft reboot category do, and it's one of the reasons why that even after people enjoy the first viewing of these films, as they rewatch them again and again and go back and examine the originals, they just feel empty and hollow and full of obnoxious fan service that really annoys the crap out of people. And this is one of the reasons why people tend to think that all the franchises are being killed, murdered in the bathtub, strangled, not to mention the fact that they often introduce woke politics into this, which are inherently divisive and make the movie-going experience far more annoying, because typically the woke politics come at the expense of the original iconic characters. Now, for the most part, in this movie, it's not really all that political. There are some scenes where Neil Patrick Harris's character just says sexist stuff for, like, reasons, I guess, to show you that sexism is bad because he's the bad guy and he's saying sexist stuff. But overall, even though he was intended to be far more political than he actually is, he's not super political. It's not very much about modern whatever's going on in the world, despite the fact that Lana Wachowski is sick of conservatives on the internet using the red pill analogy for talking about leaving progressive values. Now, while this movie, despite this blue-haired character being one of the first people you meet in watching this movie, came off as pretty apolitical, specifically for a Matrix movie, which always has some kind of allusion to or actual underlying philosophical agenda or points that they're trying to make, that's not for lack of trying. Apparently, Neil Patrick Harris's character was meant to represent Ben Shapiro, and in an interview, I think the director or one of the writers or somebody involved in the movie said that Ben Shapiro's line, "facts over feelings," is quoted by Neil Patrick Harris because the villain was modeled in some way, shape, or form after Ben Shapiro. However, if this is the case, if Neil Patrick Harris's character is modeled after Ben Shapiro, it is only modeled after Ben Shapiro in the most superficial way, in that the writer clearly never watched one of Ben Shapiro's speeches or one of the moments where he actually used facts over feelings. Because if you listen to what this character actually does, who's like the analyst, he designs the new Matrix, he actually uses Ben Shapiro's logic that feelings take precedent over facts among most people who are trapped in the Matrix, if you follow the red pill versus blue pill analogy, and he uses that ideal in order to make a more effective Matrix. So they completely inverted what they were trying to do if they were trying to go against Ben Shapiro's facts over feelings, because Neil Patrick Harris's character is using the fact that people don't put facts over feelings in order to trap them in a virtual world. So this isn't Ben Shapiro's character. This would be the thing that Ben Shapiro would be railing against when he's saying facts don't care about your feelings and neither do I. So in reality, if this was actually intended to be a political allegory for Shapiro, it's the worst one humanly possible because it inadvertently proves him right. But other than that, there's not really a lot of political nonsense in this movie, because this movie is mostly about criticizing the ideas of Hollywood that we need these soft reboots and continuations for every franchise. In the movie, Neo in The Matrix is the head of like some video game designing company, and they literally say Warner Brothers is forcing you to do a sequel, and if you refuse to make a sequel to your Matrix trilogy of video games, then the company will just do that without you. And there's a moment where Neo is like, wait a minute, I thought they couldn't do that according to our contract. And this is meant to mirror a conversation the Wachowskis had, likely, with Warner Brothers, who very publicly, it has been reported, said that they would make Matrix 4 with or without them. And as a punishment for them not being willing to play ball with the studio, they would basically cut off their entire agreement with the Wachowskis in producing any of their films going forward. So essentially, Lana Wachowski, who's the only one who returned to this film, was forced to return to this film, and the entire film is basically her being bitter about being forced to return to this and mocking the studio system for trying to churn out these soft reboots, which is the part that I actually appreciated about the movie. This is where I'm on board. Now, with all of that being said, having a metatextual message in your work, even one that I agree with, is one thing, but you have to go beyond that and actually make a good movie. And this is one of the major problems that I've seen with both of the Wachowskis ever since they came out with the first Matrix. And that is, they are by definition a one-hit wonder in terms of a filmmaking tandem, and now we only have 50% of that filmmaking tandem, and this movie is just so boring. Other than the idea that it's trying to mock the studio system, there's not a lot going on for this film. The new characters are not very interesting. Neo has nothing to do, and the action is inexcusably bad for this movie. The Matrix movies, like I said, I'm not a big fan of the sequels. I don't think they're very good. Had good action, at least in some of the set pieces in the sequels. Again, Matrix Reloaded, highway scene, which is a scene that a lot of people use to justify calling Matrix Reloaded a good movie. No, it's a fantastic scene in a not very good movie. You're allowed to have those in movies that aren't very good. But this movie, the action is just unbelievably terrible. And the thing is Keanu Reeves, I know he's an old man. I know he's not very athletic like he was in his youth, but he's still pretty athletic for an actor. Go look at the action sequences in the John Wick movies in which Keanu Reeves does about 90% of his own stunts. He works to be in physical shape in order to make these shots look good in these action movies. And if you're going to have Keanu Reeves basically look like John Wick throughout your movie, then I better be able to see him do more than force pushing like an old man throughout the course of the entire film. Now, I know and I expect Trinity to not be able to do even a fifth of what she would have been able to do when the original movies were shot. She's a woman pushing 50, but there are ways to work around that. Stunt doubles, creativity, all these things. And again, Trinity's not really in the movie that much, so it's not like you needed a ton of action out of her. But there's really no excuse for the new characters and for Keanu Reeves, who for his age and as an actor is unusually athletic and capable of performing these action scenes, to be so underwhelming throughout this movie. I'm telling you, Keanu Reeves, through 80% of the movie after he wakes up as Neo, as the One, is doing force pushes. That's all he's doing. He's like, meh, force push, meh, old man force push. That's all the action in the movie. Now, other than the fact that I was incredibly frustrated watching old man Keanu Reeves slowly walk his way and use force push after force push as if that was the only power that Keanu Reeves as the One actually has within the Matrix, the other major problem with this movie is literally everything and anything connected at all to the plot of moving the Matrix storyline forward. This stuff is so unbelievably bland, boring, and forgettable, it's just not even worth covering all that much. Jada Pinkett Smith is in this movie. I don't even remember her character from whichever Matrix movie she was in. I know for sure it's one of the sequels, but which one of the sequels, or if it was both of the sequels, I literally could not tell you, is just obnoxious. It's boring. It's not entertaining in any way. And honestly, this has always been most of the most boringest parts of this entire series. The fun stuff was breaking free from the Matrix in the first movie. The fun stuff was Neo versus Mr. Smith. Even post the first movie, a lot of people enjoyed Hugo Weaving's portrayal of this character, which is one of the reasons why they kept repeating this character in both of the sequels, literally to the point where they were just copying him. And at first, when I was watching this movie, I thought, well, this was the most boringest part of the original movies. Nobody cared about Zion. And I think now they have Io, which is like a different version of Zion. So obviously nobody's going to care about this. But then a friend of mine, Alf Benny, of the YouTube channel Alf Benny, said that they should have had, and by the way, this works with the meta-narrative that Lana Wachowski was trying to create about not being interested in Matrix sequels, the people that were basically not those who took the red pill, who chose to leave the Matrix, wanting to go back into the virtual world because the world outside of the Matrix is so much more horrible for them that they did not want to be freed by Neo. They were not interested in that. And the conflict should have been them trying to get rid of the One, Neo, kill him, so that they could re-enter the Matrix and this better form of the Matrix that is more alluring to the general population, to the quote-unquote sheeple, which, by the way, is actually a phrase used in this movie. That would have been a much better plot, and it fits the meta-narrative that the Wachowski sibling was actually trying to tell with the parts within the Matrix. People are so desperate to go back to the feelings that they had in the past, they don't realize that you just can't put the genie back in the bottle. You can't recapture the feelings associated with Matrix 1 because the Matrix, as it was said in the Red Letter Media review, was essentially the culmination of Hollywood trying time and time again to make a successful movie to capture the fear and the uncertainty and some of the little bit of disdain and worry and hope, by the way, related to the emergence of the internet. You can't really do that 20 something years later because we've had the internet around us. So trying to go back into those moments of the past, trying to embrace that nostalgia, is never going to work in reality. So why would we expect it to work for any Matrix sequel at all? Now, I've been pretty clear, and if you don't get it from the way that I'm talking about this movie in this video that you're watching now, that this movie should have never actually been made. When the Wachowskis were done with the story, they should have just let it die. It's okay to let intellectual properties die, but if you were going to make this movie and you wanted to make it a meta commentary about how people are obsessed with going back into these nostalgic franchises, then work that not just in the Matrix elements of the story, but work it into the overall plot, because that's far more suited to what we're actually seeing with one part of the movie than this whole plot revolving around saving Trinity from the Matrix. Also, a little bit of a meta joke, the character named Chad that Trinity is married to in The Matrix was actually Keanu Reeves' stunt double in the original Matrix. So literally, she is married to a knockoff version of Keanu Reeves in this universe, and I actually thought that was a bit clever. Even though, again, the plot portion of the movie, the saving Trinity portion of the movie, and the IO portion of the movie were clearly and obviously the most boringest portions of this movie. Look, I've said it before and I'll say it again, and I hope eventually you guys will listen and you will on board, join my cult of personality, and get fully in line with my opinion. The trend of soft reboots is obnoxious. We don't need them over and over again. Nostalgia should only drive you so much, and basing literally everything around nostalgia is basically stunting us and not allowing us to move forward in an artistic way. And I do worry that this might actually have downstream effects because, you know, politics downstream from culture. I'm sure you've heard that nonsense. On our culture overall, or on us as a people overall, if we're always looking backwards and glorifying franchises, even in our fiction, of a bygone era. We need to move forward, make new things and new ideas, or just adapt different things, or do the crazy thing that people have been suggesting for as long as I've been alive and probably longer, which is reboot movies that actually had good ideas but didn't work. The execution was bad. Remake bad movies instead of remaking good movies that people actually like, so that people can just say that remake doesn't live up to the original. Go back and try to fix mistakes rather than trying to copy what actually worked. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Do you think we're all trapped in the Matrix? Do you think hopefully this Matrix world will end soon? Let me know. I want to know all your ideas. If you like the video, you show me by leaving a like. You subscribe for more content. Follow me on my social media. Support me via the support links in the description box. This has been me talking about whatever the thing is. Till next time.